We've got a certain set of numbers in Social Security and Medicare, and my job is to explain to policymakers what is the story these numbers are trying to tell. Explaining to people, you know, in a more narrative fashion what's happening with these programs and what's in store for them, what sort of choices we face as a consequence of their current financial status.
Its insolvency date has drawn closer, its actuarial imbalance is larger.
To reform 2 decades from now?
Congress in particular needs to know how the financial projections for Social Security and Medicare look so that they know if and when action has to be taken to shore up the finances of these programs.
Chuck is a thoughtful individual. He's very smart and very informed about the issues. Philosophically, we might be coming from slightly different positions, but most of what we do is analytical.
I first came to Washington on a science fellowship. I was a American Physical Society Congressional Science Fellow, and I had finished up a doctorate in theoretical chemistry. And that's sort of on the border between chemistry and physics. Probably because so much of my background was mathematical, I gravitated to the budget. And you know, a lot of what I did was sort of sifting through the numbers, sort of like what I do now, sifting through the numbers and trying to help people understand the story behind the numbers.
President Obama's health care law will dump billions of dollars more onto the federal deficit. That is the conclusion of a new study by a man the president put on the Medicare Trust Board.
The paper that I did was very different from my role as a trustee.
You can't count money twice.
Writing the paper, we use terms like double counting. They sound pejorative, and they sound like someone is being less than forthright, and I understand why that would rub people the wrong way. So I try to stay away from terms like that. What I was trying to do in that paper is just get people to understand the total budgetary effect of the legislation.
There were those who wanted to use it to show a conflict between Chuck and myself, and with respect to the public trustee's responsibilities, there really was no conflict. I disagreed with his paper. I told him I disagreed with it.
We have to remember now it's much later in the game.
When I was really little, I'd go to Pirates games, and you know, on the scoreboard, they would have the batting average of the batter and the number of hits they had, and I would sit there and I'd try to calculate in my head based on what had happened, what was going to be their batting average the next time they came. And that's how I learned math, was teaching myself, you know, division and multiplication and everything in my head as a baseball fan. That became a passion for me.
What is happening in Oakland?
It defies.
Moneyball came along a lot later, and it sort of took certain tenets of what people like me were doing and sort of fed them up for sort of a mass consumption.
But what can he do?
He gets on base.
So there's certain statistical things you have to understand in order to be a good baseball general manager, but they're certainly not the only things you have to understand. I think with Medicare, you could say, well, look, here's the spectrum of value judgments you could make. And we as trustees can tell you these are what the numbers imply, and these are what the numbers mean in terms of framing the choices before you. But the subjective policy evaluation, you know, it's subjective. People are going to have to make their value judgments.